When I look back, it was a pretty dark time. And I think with a lot of people in special forces, they've come through that sort of difficulty. Yeah, I came from a broken marriage. There's a lot of noise going on in the house. Looking back at that changed my whole life massively. As that went on, the space around me started to grow. And in my mind, I started to believe that I was the best Northern soul dancer on the planet. I think one of the things that I looked about after I'd finished is the fact I could be fucked around in any part of the world, but I would never give up. It comes at you really fast, and so the ground's coming at me, it goes pretty dark, and I'm like, I'm going to die.
Welcome to the Business Sense podcast. I'm Gary Crosby. This is the podcast where we make sense of the business journey by talking to owners about what they've learned along the way. Let's jump into today's episode. Jem, thanks for joining me today on the Business Sense podcast.
Absolute pleasure, Gary.
I'm very excited about this conversation. So many places that we want to take it. And obviously, I want to explore the elite special forces mindset, because I know that's part of the business that you're running at the moment. What are you doing with business leaders as far as that's concerned?
Over the last few years, I've become a performance coach, and I got into that because of my sort of story, my backstory, which is pretty inspirational. Yeah, how you come from not very much to achieving, in many people's eyes, greatness. Yeah, and that elite group of people that I work with, using that now to take that, and it's just all those hints, tips that I can take into business and help business leaders going forward.
I'm really keen to explore that, but let's take you back to the beginning. I want to imagine, you're in your formative years, and I'm thinking about mindset. We're going to talk about mindset a lot. I'm thinking about your mindset and what it was that triggered you to think, now I'd like to become a Marine. Talk me through that.
When I look back, it was a pretty dark time. And I think with a lot of people in special forces, they've come through that sort of difficulty. Yeah, I came from a broken marriage. There's a lot of noise going on in the house. And that meant that we moved to a different part of the town. My parents were divorced. But moving into a different part of the town, and my father moving many miles away, I acquired a bully quite early on, at sort of 8 years old.
Yeah.
I don't think he woke up that morning to become a bully, but I was very introvert. I was very shy, and started to have a communication problem. And obviously the bullying didn't help that. And that grew and grew to losing a lot of the momentum on my academic side, and ended up probably in the worst school in our area. First day, still remember that first day, arriving there, new school uniform, big school, apprehensive, wasn't good with people. And at the first break, in the playground, you're out there hoping to meet new friends. And I just remember getting a tap on the shoulder, turning round in anticipation of meeting somebody new, and all I saw was the punches coming in, and I was punched to the ground, and you're not at effing public school anymore. So that was day one. Yeah. And the guy that did that bullied me for the next few years, which takes you into, I think you lose your self-confidence, but most of all, I lost my self-worth. But fortunately, there was something that changed. And looking back at that changed my whole life massively. And it was dance. Right. And I got into a dance called Northern Soul. It was a bit of an urban dance, a street dance. And I'd seen these guys doing it. I had no confidence, but I knew I wanted to get involved in it. It was, this black soul music and this athletic movement. And I was like, wow.
Very energetic.
Yeah. And I was like, wow. So I started watching what these guys were doing, and they became my role models. And I wanted to do what they did, so I went back to my safe haven, my bedroom, and I practiced, and I practiced, and I practiced, and I gradually got better. We found out where bigger Northern Soul events were taking place. And one, not too far from here, an event happened. It was a proper Northern Soul event. We'd arrived there, and right in the middle of it, they announced a Northern Soul dance competition.
Right.
I did not expect to. In fact, I didn't have the confidence to even enter. But they put a great song on. I got onto the floor, and fortunately, the judges were walking around the outside of the dance floor, tapping people on the shoulder and asking them to sit down.
Yeah.
And as that went on, the space around me started to grow. And in my mind, I started to believe that I was the best Northern Soul dancer on the planet.
Yeah.
And it's it's your own style. And I started to exaggerate my movements, and I just got into a space. And for 2.5 minutes, I totally believed that I was the best dancer in the world. Looking back at that now, well, just as the record finished, I was tapped on the shoulder and I was asked to sit down. You know, my dream had ended. But I just wanted more of that feeling. And looking back at that now, that started a lifelong learning and the pursuit of excellence. I went and watched what the winners were doing, copied what they were doing, went back to my safe haven, practiced. And they say, 10,000 hours of anything, you get pretty good.
Yeah.
And I got in the top 20, top 10, and actually started to win a few of these Northern Soul dance competitions, which competence increases your confidence. And my confidence was growing. I became the Northern Soul dancer. My local little community, I became something. And that was really important to me at the time. And it was in the back of geography. My academic career wasn't going well, but my Northern Soul career was pretty amazing. But back in my geography lesson, a friend, he passed me a poster, and it had all these guys doing all these different things.
Oh, join the Navy and see the world, that sort of thing.
It actually had Raw Marine Commandos at the top.
Oh, okay,
but I had no idea who they were. It could have been the RAF. And I looked at this poster, but the PR of the poster, there was one picture in the middle of the poster, 4 guys on a beach, palm tree, beer in hand. And it's like in 1976, the Marines took a holiday. And I was like, wow, not only do you get to do all this stuff, but you get to go on a holiday. I'd never been in a plane. I'd never been on holiday. I came from that sort of background. And so I was like, Paul, how do you join? And he said, Jem, it's easy. I've just joined. He hadn't just joined. He just applied to join. But in my mind, it was, you can get all this and it's easy. Why not? I ran home that night, told my mum. She didn't know who the Marines were either. And that was it. Application went in. And then, my career started in the Royal Marines.
And how do they teach mindset? You talked about the pursuit of excellence. What's their view of how they want their soldiers to perform?
I think that's really interesting. And they start with, there was 51 of us started, and we ended up with 23. But with Marine training, it's about being a team and coming through it together. There's the last part of Royal Marine training is the Royal Marine Commando training. So the last 6 weeks is the most difficult bit, which I think if you look at it, if they put that at the front end, everybody would fail. So it's about that growth. It's about your physical growth, but it's about your mindset growth. And there's a lot of resilience in there as well. And it's how do you build resilience? And it's pushing young men as far as you can. When you're involved in it, you think you're probably about to die. But they know the limits. And so they'll take you till that last bit where you're hurting, you don't think you can give any more. I think the mud run is a pretty good example of that. It is horrendous, trying to run in mud. And you just push you and push you and push you. But it's like, okay, stand up, fall forwards. Let's go back. And then the following day, obviously, we go away and recover overnight. We prepare all our kit for the following day. but then they'll push you a little bit further.
Yes.
And it's understanding that. And
I think in some of my RAF training, I mean, they're clearly not on the same level of physicality, but the aircrew training is certainly reasonably tough at the beginning. And the concept was, take these cocky young men and break them down and then build them back up as the kind of people that we want in the service. Did you feel like that was the case? Everyone starts to behave the same and think the same. They all look the same. They're all wearing the same uniform. There's a big team ethos, but actually what they're doing is breaking you apart and then putting you back together.
Pretty much, but understanding where that limit is, and it's making you part of a team, and I think that's all part of that. You want to get rid of the individuality, and then start to build people's individuality back up in the ray. Giving them the values, giving them the ethos and the culture of being part of that organisation.
Yeah, which, and we'll come to it later, but I guess that has a direct play across into business.
Absolutely. Yeah, culture. Yeah. Every business should have a great culture.
So now you're in one of the most elite fighting forces in the world, the Royal Marine Commandos, and I'm curious about whether or not that next step for you, which is to become part of the Special Forces, is a thing that came from within, whether it was part of the Marine culture, whether they were looking out for the best in the Marines to go forward into Special Forces. How did that come about?
Going through Royal Marine training, you then start to look at what do you want to do when you've finished Royal Marine training. And the hardest, toughest, according to those that were in it, commando units was 4-5 Commando.
Right.
And I volunteered, this is that pursuit of excellence. I volunteered for 4-5 Commando, which they are the Arctic warfare specialists.
Right.
Their whole area was the North Atlantic or Norway. We'd be out in Norway every year, and they teach you how to survive in the Arctic. They taught me how to ski, and I love the fact that I ski telemark, the old school. But that's how you had to learn, because if you're skiing in the mountains, you can't have a hill binding. You've got to be able to go up and down. But before that training, before we got to Norway, we did mountain training, which would always be in October, November, the coldest part of the year, up in Scotland. And initially, I hated it. In fact, the first part of that would be running on sand dunes in a place called Lunan Bay, and it was horrendous. And I thought Royal Marine training was bad. And then, in the Marines back then, we had two groups of people that I aspired to be, and we had mountain leaders, and we had the Special Boat Service.
Right.
And my first contact, the Special Boat Service, were always in the shadows, operating at night. You never saw them. But being in 4-5 Commando, my role models became the mountain leaders, and they would be the guys that took all our Arctic training. And they'd start off at Lunan Bay, pushing us over the sand dunes. Again, a bit like mud running.
Yeah.
Your legs just feel like they've got nothing left.
I bet.
And then they take you back, you do your rest and recovery, and the following day you're back out there again. And then a couple of weeks later, you'll be up in the mountains of Scotland, wet, cold, PT in the morning, and up and down. And I hated it. It was a physical challenge. But it's become a passion now. As you know, I love being in the mountains, and we walk. But it's understanding that, and I think what I hadn't realised, it was a bit of an apprenticeship for Special Forces.
Yeah.
I was doing that on a regular basis, and I came to really like being in the mountains and doing the arduous training that we did.
But it sounds like everybody in the Royal Marines would have been looking up at the SBS. They would have been recognising the SBS as the next step in that elite pursuit of excellence. So was there a kind of a natural progression, or was there a moment where you thought, right, I've had enough of 4-5? I was just thinking, I wonder if there's a Caribbean warfare unit, because that would have been much nicer. But was there a moment when you thought, right, I've had enough of 4-5 and I'm now going to put my request in, or were you picked to go forward?
It's totally volunteer.
Right.
But being in Norway on one winter deployment, we had an opportunity to work alongside some of these guys that hid in the shadows.
Yeah.
And I think the reality was, okay, it's tough, and it was an aspiration, but it was always not a goal. It hadn't been a goal at that point. And you are starting to look at what is next. But seeing these guys actually flesh and blood, they are human. Yeah, they're not superheroes. Yes, it's going to be tough. And that's the first time I actually came across a coach. You know, in the Marines, we didn't have coaches.
No.
But I had a really good troop sergeant. And after we'd had an encounter with these guys, I sat down with him and had a chat.
Yeah.
And it was like, are you serious? Do you really want to go this way? And I was like, yeah, I'm very much so. And he's like, okay, if you do, then there's some planning and preparation that needs to be done.
Yeah.
And he helped me. So he actually coached me. And we set, and this is the thing, you know, I look back now, didn't understand goals, but, you know, we set goals, we set targets. And that was getting myself ready for the unknown. There wasn't anywhere you could go to find out what you had to do. You just knew it was tougher than tough. It was, you know, the toughest course that everybody was frightened of doing. There was you couldn't go on the internet to find out what was going on. It was a secret course. And so you just knew I had to run faster than I'd been running before. So we trained harder. Had to swim. I enjoyed swimming, but swimming underwater, I'd never dive, but I knew I had to be pretty good on the surface. So I did a lot of swimming training.
Yeah.
Navigation. So there's all these different aspects of planning to join this elite organization.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about the mindset there as well, because you said you're taking a step into the unknown. So everybody knows from, you know, modern media that these selection processes are phenomenally tough physically. But did your troop sergeant sort of get into your head as well and say, you know, in this training you're going to find yourself in situations where every chromosome in your body is screaming for you to quit, and it's your mind that's going to carry you through?
No, he hadn't done the training. So again, it was the unknown. But we knew it was going to be difficult. And sometimes, how do you train for the unknown? It's trying to get yourself as prepared as possible. And that's what I did. I spoke to a lot of people, and the only people you can actually speak to when you're in the Marines are people that have probably failed, and they're going to tell you it's impossible.
Yeah.
So you have this dilemma. Do you push yourself for it? Do you volunteer for it? When am I ready to volunteer for it? But at some point, I decided I was and volunteered.
So you get yourself onto the selection process, and I think you said to me before that, you know, there was a 96% failure rate on your course. So I'm thinking about the DS, the directing staff on the course. You know, looking at all of the people who volunteered and are taking part. What are they looking for in mindset terms?
Determination. They're looking for somebody that no matter what will never give up. And I think one of the things that I looked about after I'd finished is the fact I could be fucked around in any part of the world, but I would never give up. And I think it's that determination that you realise that you go through to push yourself every morning. And when I look back of how I did that, for me, it was 17 weeks. We knew the lengths of the course, but we had no idea what was going to take place during that course.
Wow.
And so it was breaking it down into bite-sized pieces. And for me, it was to have a routine. I had a target I had to reach every day. So the goal was to finish the 17 weeks, not knowing what we were going to take. Our datum point was 6 o'clock every morning. We would have the hardest PT session that you could imagine. So my routine would be every night is on my locker door, I had a calendar, and I would tick off a day. But I would check my alarm on the watch that was set for 10 to 6, and you didn't press pause. As soon as it went off, you jumped straight out. My PT kit I'd put on a chair by the side of the bed, check the alarm, tick off a day, and then go to bed.
Yeah. Probably exhausted and no question of having trouble getting to sleep.
Without question. The problem is, in the first few weeks of that training, they also throw in, you don't know what you're doing during the day, which is pretty tough, but they give you sleep deprivation, which is the unexpected. And that, again, is taking it out of you. It's draining you.
Yeah.
And it didn't matter what time you may go to bed at 8 o'clock at night after done. The biggest lesson was all the preparation would be done. Kit first, then you.
Yeah.
And you get into bed and you'd be out light, but it could be 10 o'clock in the evening, or it could be 2 o'clock in the morning.
Somebody throws a thunder flash into the...
Absolutely.
Off you go.
Yeah. Some of those, to give you an example, is on one occasion, I had and it shows the international side of our organisation. My training officer was a US SEAL team officer. So we did a lot of their type of BUDS nightmare training that they'd throw in.
Yeah.
And we had an Australian SAS sergeant, head of the DS.
Right.
And on this one occasion, it was like, I think we were woken up at 10 o'clock or 10 to 10. We were always given three things, what you had to wear, where we had to be, and how long we had to get there. And it was 10 o'clock outside his office. And in Special Forces, they don't shout, they tend to ask you to do something. It's exactly the same as somebody shouting at you, and they expect it to be done, and it will be done. But he was like, tomorrow morning I've been asked, the chief's constable just rang me and he said, I want to play golf tomorrow. He said, so I'm really excited about playing golf. Unfortunately, I forgot to ask him where. And he said, I like the advantage. He said, by 6 o'clock tomorrow morning, I need a detailed map of every golf course in the area. And there were 16 golf courses.
Yeah.
And we...
And no Google Maps.
So after the shock of understanding what we did, great leadership task. Stop, think, what do we have to do? Get a map out. We split ourselves into teams of 4. All our car keys had been taken off us. So we had to run to each of the locations. I think we had 2 or 3 golf courses.
Yeah.
You'd have to break into the golf course. 2 would do the first 9. The other 2 would do the second 9 to 18. Walk or run from the pin, the tee to the pin, to where the flag is. Mark it, sort of how far is it, where are the bunkers, where is the green.
Wow.
And then on to the next one, meet up at the entrance, and then run to the next golf course. And we got in probably about 5:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
Handed in the maps. Don't think he ever used them, but we handed in the maps. Got into bed, alarm goes off at 10 to 6.
Yeah.
Up we get, day starts.
Yeah. Crazy. Character building, I would say. Thinking about that 96% that failed, I know you said you were looking around at some people that you really respected and that you really thought that they would make brilliant soldiers, and yet they didn't make it through. What was it about their mindset then that was a challenge for them to get through the course?
So it's a really interesting point, because you're constantly looking at people around you, and it is always tough. And it's like, how much, because you haven't been there before. Special Forces is about you pushing yourself. There isn't any instructors. The DS are there to help you. Here's a ticket. Here's a cup of tea. Come and have a cup of tea. And as soon as you put your hand up to leave the program, you are out.
That's it. Yeah.
So when you're constantly aware of some of the challenges that go on, and we'd have what we call bee stings, and we do something wrong, and it's a bit of a punishment. But they're actually looking to push us as far as they could at that stage and see who had the determination to go forward. There's always cold water around. Yeah. Wherever we were, we'd be in cold water doing press-ups. Yeah. And they'd push us as far as 1 or 2 people. Yeah. The American SEALs, they have a bell
Right.
We didn't need a bell. You just have a hand. All
Really?
you have to do is to raise your hand. And it was like, yes, I'm out. No
VW
question.
or whatever it's called.
Yeah. And everybody knew. It was like, oh, there's another one. Why did he go? And I just remember, we're getting really close to the end. So you've 1 or 2 to 1 week left. And one of the guys, I was thinking, wow, he's just so fit. He's doing really well. Just turned around to me and he was like, Jem, I'm giving in. I'm out of here. And I'm like, why? And he said, I cannot take it anymore. But we can't see
15 weeks in. Yeah.
You can't see anybody else's resilience. It's one of the things about looking at everybody. You can't look at the beginning of those, in my case, 160 people. It's very difficult to look at those at that stage and say, he'll pass, he'll fail, he'll pass. Otherwise, you could have that selection on the first day.
Yeah, of course. So you get through selection and, you become, you said it was... you're 1% of the 1%. So this is truly in the elite fighting forces of the world at this point. And I'm thinking now that you're in that organisation, and there's, I imagine, because I don't know, but there's a real focus on training. There's probably some operational work going on as well. How are they, once you're in that unit, in that special forces environment, continuing to create that elite sort of mindset?
Once you join, you'll join different teams. I mean, as I mentioned, the 17 weeks is just the first phase.
Yes.
There's then a second phase, but that is your selection period.
Yes.
So pretty much once you've passed that, but then there'll be another phase to that where you do more detailed training. So probably about a year's training before you actually get into the teams.
Right, okay.
Then once you're into the teams, you're at the bottom of the run. It starts off. I do remember coming back into the compound after we'd finished selection, and so you're on a high. You're absolutely amazing. You feel nothing could hurt you. And we walked into the Sergeant Major's office, and actually walking through there, it was like, there was lots of legends, all these heroes, that old and bold walking about, and we were here. And we got into Sergeant Major's office, and he said, morning, guys. You guys okay? Yeah, we're fine. He said, on your way in, did you see the brushes? The brushes? No. He said, if you go back out into the compound, there's 6 brushes. There was 6 of us had passed.
Yeah.
He said, the compound needs sweeping. No, it doesn't. Didn't actually say that because you wouldn't argue with this guy, but
no.
Out we went.
Yeah.
And that was us being told we're on the bottom of the run. Yeah, and it's a great learning experience in front of all these legends. There we are, sweeping the yard.
It reminds me of the end of my aircrew training. So I've been in training for 4 years, and you graduate and they stick the flying badge on your chest, and you get that same kind of slightly puffed up feeling. The instructor said, when you go to your operational squadron, you'll be no use to anybody for 18 months. So I want you to fly, and I want you to shut up, and I want you to watch, and I want you to listen, and that's it. Don't get any ideas. And sure enough, when we got to the unit, it was exactly like that. You don't get that kind of rounded tactical view of what you're doing for quite some time. So,
absolutely. And it was then going on different deployments of how seeing the other guys and for me, it was looking for role models now in that organisation. People I could see on a regular basis that had great values, that determination, and just follow what they were doing. And it's a total learning curve, as you said. You've spent a year's training, but you're back at learning at the start point.
Yeah.
And learning those skills are going to take you for the next, in my case, 20 years in Special Forces.
And how do units like the special boat service, how do they build the team ethos? Because in business people come into work and they do what they're required, but in the military you tend to live in each other's pockets for long periods of time. You said you were looking for examples and role models, but how do they build the team ethos?
Having come from the Marines, the Marines have an amazing ethos that is built upon the belief, that you're in the right place with the organisation, the people. Special Forces is that on steroids.
Right.
And it's having those people around you that are massive role models, but having the organisation, and building that. You start off in a team of 4. So you have a team leader, who'll be very experienced. We get known as the FNGs.
Right, I can imagine.
Okay. And gradually trust is given to you. You're given small tasks.
Yes.
You might be responsible for the ammunition or the weapons. On the end of a day, the end of a week, we have certain jobs that we have to do. And I think one of the biggest things that is transferable from Special Forces is the debrief of how much debrief we do. At the end of every week, we'd have prayers.
Yes.
And you'd sit down and you become a valued member of that team. And, as you become a team leader and you go up the ladder and you run these prayers on a Friday, you're holding people to account. You're holding people responsible for what they've done during the week. And running training.
Yeah.
We'd always get, the junior members of the team to run that training, whether that was small PT sessions or a whole week's counter-terrorist training, and bring them up, empower them to do more. So you're constantly empowering and enabling people to take responsibility and do more than they were expected to do at that level of rank. And then at the end of the week, you would do a thorough debrief. If you're doing counter-terrorist training, you maybe debrief after each run, because it was so important. And I think that's one of the things that is often missed in business. People will get an annual appraisal.
Yes.
Why not help them every week? Sort of tell them where they're going wrong, help them, and give them advice to move up and to grow. Because I think we all fail in something, or we'll make mistakes. But every time we make a mistake, it's learning.
Yeah. I mean, that's the same with, flying on this thing. You debrief every single mission.
Absolutely.
And people are going to sit around for a long period of time, hours potentially, talking about what happened and why it went the way it did and what went well and what didn't go so well. So,
well, you'll know in the counter-terrorist side, if we'd have so many different assets working with us, including the amazing Nimrod, and the platform in the air, we would get the crews in. We get as many people into that debrief because it's so important. The helicopter pilots, sort of anybody who'd had an involvement. We couldn't probably get the pilots of the aircraft in, but we'd get their LO. So all the points of that debrief come out, and some things go wrong.
Yeah, frequently. And that's a great segue, because life did throw you a pretty big curveball, didn't it? And you had an accident that could have turned out very differently. Tell us a bit about that.
It's quite interesting. When I started speaking, I've got a great public speaking coach. And he said, Jem, all you need is 4 stories. Your homework is to go away and just find 4 stories that can translate to business, that business people can understand. And you've just got a lot of stories. So I went away to put together these 4 stories and actually started looking at near-death experiences. And 20 years in Special Forces, you look back and I'm just happy to be sat here at a table facing you.
Yeah.
And I had 13 near-death experiences. I wrote them all down, debriefed them to Andy. And as I'm going through, he was like, oh, that's great. Yeah, we could use that one. And then he went, is that it? And I went, well, no, there's the other one. He said, what's that? I said, I just tell it after a few beers in a bar. He said, explain that then. And he said, I said, it was a parachute accident. I said, what happened? I said, well, I had a malfunction on my main canopy, and then I had a malfunction on the reserve. And he's like, tell me more. And when I look at that, you make a plan for everything. The military's pretty good at doing that, especially when things go wrong, and you'll have emergency drills. You'll fly in the aircraft, you've got a set of emergency drills. And on this day, I needed every one of those. And we were jumping 800 feet,
Okay.
pretty low,
Not a lot of time.
not a lot of time. I think you're talking 16 seconds.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when you jump out, we're jumping at static line, and you fall 200 feet before the static line pulls and your parachute deploys. And at that stage, I knew there's something wrong as I went into twist, but jumping out of an aircraft at 200 miles an hour is you can get twists, and there's a drill for that. So you grab your lift webs, pull them apart, and you'll spin back. But at that stage, that's when I realised I had a major problem. As I went to grab my lift web, this one had gone. And I looked up and I could just see.
Yeah.
That's when the heart does go. It goes every time you jump out of an aeroplane, but it kicked into neat adrenaline at that stage. And there was a few curse words.
Yeah.
And so, there's a drill for that. I'd never used it on parachuting, and I'd done quite a lot of parachute jumps. And it's grab red handle of the reserve parachute, which sits on your chest. Pull red handle. Pull the red handle. And on the ground, it works really nicely. There's a big spring behind it. It pushes out, and then it comes out, blossoms wide, and you sail down. On this occasion, that wasn't happening. So I'd fallen 200 feet. By the time I'd thought about what I needed to do, I'm probably 300 feet. So, you're 500 feet from the ground, thinking I should pull the red handle. 400 feet, reserve parachute deploys, or should have deployed, but it didn't. And at that stage, I was like, now what? Now what is that? What is that last drill? As I'm falling, picking up speed, 120 miles an hour terminal velocity, falling through the air, going, what was that last drill? Flap it like your mother's sheet.
Right.
Here we go. So 300 feet, 200 feet, flapping this sheet in front of me, and it wasn't working. And all I remember at that stage was you get ground rush. I don't know if you've ever fallen from it.
Yes, I have parachuted, yeah.
But without anything.
Not without a parachute.
So you get, it comes at you really fast. Yeah. And so the ground's coming at me. It goes pretty dark because you've just fallen below the circumference. And I'm like, I'm going to die. I've got no drills left. Yeah, I'm at 200 feet, 100 feet. And at that stage, I just carried on flapping. But in my mind, I'm thinking, I just wish I could have spent more time with my kids. In Special Forces, you're away a lot.
Yeah.
And that regret, and my wife. And it's like, here we go. And then I hit the ground. And pretty much that's a lot. Well, after, I don't know how long on the ground, but I opened my eyes, and for a few seconds, thought I was probably in heaven. It was bright blue. I couldn't hear anything, and I couldn't feel anything. I probably had so much adrenaline in my body.
Yeah.
But I was lying on the ground, and within a few seconds, the negativity starts to tell you, your brain, you've just survived, but you've broken every bone in your body. You're never going to walk again. So it's total negativity that starts coming through. And
yeah,
I lifted my head, and I could see the ambulance.
Wow.
So I lifted my head on. My neck's okay. And then, the ambulance was screaming across to me, and the little ants were getting bigger as I wasn't where I was meant to be. The people on the ground were running towards me. And I was like, okay, can I move my arms? So then started to move my arms, and then the worst part was, can I move my legs? I pretty much knew I must have landed feet first. So it's like, have I broken my back? And I thought I could move my toes.
Wow.
And then I started to move my legs, and I started to hit myself because I wanted to feel, because I couldn't feel anything. I had so much adrenaline. So I started to punch myself, and the ambulance screamed up, and the medics jump out, and they're going, stop.
Stop hitting
There's
yourself.
a dying ant on the floor, and I'm like, I'm alive. And they're going, stop, you idiot. We need to get the harness off. So they took the harness off, did the checks. And I survived. But I look back at that and it's like, I think anybody who's had a near miss is like, life's not a rehearsal, live every day to the full. Was it foolish or was it this determination that you get in special forces? Two guys, two of my mates, they jumped in the first stick, they ran across and they're like, Jem, why didn't you pull your reserve early? I'm like, oh. We have this, humour in the face of adversity.
Can I have your boots? Yeah.
And it was like,
I'm still alive.
Yeah. And there's a few curse words in there as well. And the medics were trying to get me on the stretcher. And I said, can you stand me up? And they're like, what? And I said, can you stand me up? And I still don't know how this happened, but I think we were the 3 senior guys on the DZ, the drop zone. And people don't tend to argue as special forces. I was like, can you stand me up? And the medics were like, no, you need to be on here. And I was like, no, can you stand me up? And my mates were like, Jem, you're an idiot. But I had this mindset, and you talked about mindset earlier, was to finish the job. And for me, that was to walk off the DZ.
Wow.
Unless I can't.
Yeah.
And it's the same if you're playing rugby and you break a finger or an arm. You want to carry on. You want to continue the job until it's done. I said, can you stand me up? And they're like, you're an idiot, Jem, but we will. We'll get you on your feet. Stood me up, walked me off. And the medics are like, you're crazy. Instead of getting in the ambulance and going to hospital, we got on the bus and we went to the pub. And I look back as a fairly senior guy at that time. I would never have let that happen at the time.
Of course.
And a short while after that, I found out I'd broken my back. Luckily, no nerves had been severed, but the damage was done.
Yeah. So those experiences and those stories that you tell, you take them into the business world. I'm wondering where you start with senior business leaders, because of course in the military there's a lot of strategy, there's a lot of campaign planning, there's a lot of briefing, as you say. What's your approach with a business leader? He's running a big business and wants to get that elite special forces mindset.
Find out where he wants to go.
Yeah.
A lot of it is as you know, as a coach, it's listening.
Yeah.
It's find out where they want to go, what they want to achieve. And that might take a few sessions of actually getting into them and building that trust. I think it's very much with a coach. It's a very personal relationship.
Yeah,
you're getting into somebody's head. You're getting into places where they sometimes don't want to open up. But it is very much about helping them overcome the obstacles that they may perceive. Quite a few people, they'll reach a glass ceiling, and they just don't know how to get through it. And I work with some amazing people that I couldn't aspire to do what they do. They're in top leadership roles. But we've all got problems.
We're all human.
Absolutely, yeah. and it's problems or obstacles and life. What do we want to get out of life? And I think that it's not just business. It's got to marry. It's got to be part of where is your life goal? Where do you see yourself going? And some people, after a few sessions, will probably realize that where they think they want to go isn't where they want to go.
Yeah.
So it's getting into that. And I think very much about when you're setting goals, there's got to be that emotional side to it. You can plan business goals, but I much prefer to look at your life goal first. Where do you really want to go? And then how can we plan and program and look to help that individual achieve what they really want to achieve.
And can you inculcate in people, you mentioned earlier that one of the prime qualities that you've got to have in that kind of environment is determination, the idea that you should never give up. Is that something you can teach people, or is that a natural quality that they've got to have?
If I look back to having that pursuit of excellence and having to drive, they've got there. The people I work with have achieved quite a lot. So they have got determination in whatever field, and it's linking, getting that determination out and linking it to a passion of what they want to do. Right. And I think that is, for me, that's the important part of tying it together, but again, bringing in focus. It's having the vision and then having the focus to carry it through. And in this world, as we all know, distractions.
Yes, yeah.
Everything is, how do we overcome those distractions, and how do we set... it's quite interesting if you look at flow. When you get into flow, you don't know until you've finished. Your mind, you're in it.
Yep.
And I think that's, if you can explain that or show that and help people get into those stages of pursuing what they want to the extent of putting that amount of focus, and it just comes to focus. When I look at flow and look at the roles in special forces, the main time when we would get into flow is in counterterrorism and those operations. And if in the middle of something going on, a guy to the left of you or guy to the right of you goes down, you immediately step in. You know exactly what their role is. You know exactly what should have taken place, and you can just move in without even thinking about it. It's understanding the organisation. We were very fortunate to do a lot of training. In business, you don't have the time to do that training, but you can push yourself and look at other ways. Your personal development. How can we build our personal development in a way that's going to work for us and not against us? Understanding how we build ourselves to achieve what we want to achieve within the organisation we're working.
And as you say, clarity and focus, removal distractions is quite powerful there. I'm wondering if the business leaders want to build the same kind of team ethos that they might imagine the military has. Is there something there that you can help them with in terms of bonding people together? You were in very small teams, 4 people in your environment. This was a crew of 29, but it was still a crew. So how do you get the business leaders to think about team ethos like that?
I think bringing people together and doing team tasks is really good, and then making those tasks a little bit challenging. If you can do it outdoors and it's raining, it adds to it. But you can do those tasks inside, but it's setting challenges. Yeah, I'm a big believer of everything you do should be not always fun, but we should want to do it. And if you can put a fun element in it, all the challenges that I've ever done, there'd always be a reward. And having whatever it is, celebrate your successes, enjoy what you've done, because it just helps you look forward to the next thing. But team tasks is a big one. Bringing the teams together and doing things differently.
Right. What do you mean by that?
It's like you could set a task out, outdoors, a leadership task where people are self-selected. They volunteer to do the different tasks, the different leadership parts of that task. Yeah. But then you just throw something in and saying, right, one of you guys is now blind, or one of you guys now has a disability, or you can't communicate. How do you then complete the task with a sideball that's just come in, that you weren't expecting, and it's still achieving the task. You may have to give a little help sometimes, but it's achieving the task, and then people realizing, wow, that was great. I really enjoyed that.
I always think that one of the things that flows across from my perspective is planning, and particularly the idea that there should always be a contingency plan. Whenever I was airborne in this thing, we always knew where the nearest airfield was to divert to if something went wrong with the aircraft. So there's always contingency in the background. I don't see a lot of that in business. People tend to be even if they are goal focused, they're very forward focused, and there's not often a backup plan. Do you help people with that sort of thing?
I'll always talk about having a plan B. Whatever the situation, we would always try and plan. It didn't always work. Things, curveball would come in, but you would plan. You'd have a plan A, which would be the main option. You'd then have a plan B, and the last plan would be our evacuation plan. How do we get out of here? And we plan that in great detail, and there's a lot goes into that, but it's a debriefing of each of, you plan and then debrief.
Yeah.
And I think with business, you know, if you're going for a bid, there's a lot of planning that goes in for that bid and how many different people. We would always bring in an expert, you know, from whatever area we're going into. So get help. Yeah, some business leaders don't like asking for help
No.
because they think they're there. But it's like, no, on certain stages, whatever the task, bring in some help. Definitely have a coach. But it's at the end of that, if it hasn't worked, quickly debrief it and how do we move to the next? Yeah. Most businesses, when they are going for something, they put all their effort into it.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult for them to say, well, what about plan B? But you can adapt the plan you have.
Yes, yeah. I like Marshall Goldsmith's view of feed forward, you know, so he doesn't spend a lot of time debriefing what's gone wrong, but there's a big focus on, you know, what should we do better next time?
Absolutely.
And I know you've got to know what's gone wrong to have that conversation, but that's interesting. So the very senior leaders, do you see in them a different mindset naturally anyway?
Yeah, and I think I love working with senior leaders, but I love, and I'll bring this up, is working with, you know, the new leaders.
Yeah.
Because quite often in businesses, what is forgotten about is, Joe, he's a fantastic salesman. He's sold all this stuff this week and then the following week, and he's reaching his targets. Let's give him a team.
Yeah.
And it just drops off because he doesn't know how to teach it or work with a team.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'll always say is look at the people, the influencers in the company, not necessarily the CEO, but the influencers within your company.
Yeah.
What are they doing differently? Yeah, to do that. And it's that mindset. Those influencers are people that will achieve. They may not achieve in that company, but they'll go somewhere. They're people that want something. And it's looking at that and then, but it's whether it's debriefing with your team or debriefing with your coach, it's like how do we improve exactly what you're saying to move forward and learning.
It's great stuff, Jem. I mean, some good stories in there and some great lessons for business leaders as well, in particular. I knew it was going to be interesting. The mindset stuff is fascinating, the way the Special Forces sees the world, their frame of reference. So thank you for coming in. Thanks for sharing the story. It's been a great conversation.
Absolute pleasure.